Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. And it's with a heavy heart that this is actually going to be, and I haven't told our guest today, actually going to be our last ever podcast. Because I'm moving on to other things, which I'll chat about with our guest today. And it's a true honor to have this guest as our last guest on this podcast. It's the great Dr. Mark Hyman. How's it going, Doc?
It's so good, Sam. Glad to be here.
It's a real pleasure. And just to kind of give you an explanation, because I didn't tell you before we started, so it's a little bit of a surprise.
A little shock.
But I'm actually
going to the best for last, something like that. Is that just...
Yeah, so something like that. Keep you on your toes. That's what I like to do. But a lot of our listeners and viewers and things will know that I'm actually moving on to public health charities to inform and influence within the UK and hopefully beyond that as well, called the Public Health Collaboration. So if you want to check it out, you can go to phcuk.org, find out what we're doing there. It's a team of UK-based docs that are trying to make good things happen, particularly here in the UK and hopefully beyond.
I love that.
So definitely check out that. But anyway, it's a real pleasure to have you here, Dr. Hyman, and it's a true honor because anybody that's anybody in fitness will know about Dr. Mark Hyman. And it's amazing to be able to chat to you today about your new book, Eat Fat, Get Thin. But before we kind of get into all the ins and outs of that, what I'd really like to find out is how you got into the position that you are today. You
mean as a doctor, a writer, or advocate?
All of them. Sorry, doctor, writer, director.
Well, that's going to take up the whole 30 minutes. That's like the whole 30 minutes. Listen, I've always been passionate about health, and I've just been on a journey to discover. And it all started actually when I lived in college with a roommate who was a PhD student in nutrition, and he got me to read a book called Nutrition Against Disease in 1978 by a guy named Roger Williams, who was one of the fathers of modern nutrition and biochemistry and really of functional medicine. He wrote the book called Biochemical Individuality way back when. And so all that sort of started my sort of thinking about how food played a role in health. And then I got sick and ended up having a really severe chronic fatigue illness from mercury poisoning after living in China. Had to cure myself, discovered functional medicine, and just became an advocate because I feel like there was this solution that we don't have access to for most people. And the truth is that science is advancing so fast, the practice is not caught up, and so many people are not getting access to the type of care that's based on understanding the root cause of disease and not just treating the symptoms. So functional medicine is about treating the cause, not the symptoms, by treating the body as a system, not just the symptoms. And it's really a very fundamentally different approach. And that's really why I've been doing this, why I opened my own center, why I'm at the Cleveland Clinic, why I write books, just to communicate the ideas that people can actually get empowered with the tools they need to change their life and their health. And most of the time, you don't need a doctor. I hate to say it, being one myself, but most of the time, you don't.
And you can just kind of use books and resources online to just help yourself. And
it's all information. You get empowered with tools and knowledge. And I've worked with thousands and thousands of people who are my patients through online programs or through church programs, and it's like one doctor to thousands of people. By just giving them the right information, they can be empowered to change their lives and get healthy.
Fantastic. Now, the book, Eat Fat, Get Thin, is available now on Amazon. And for folks watching or listening, if you go to smashthefat.com/EFGTUS, if you're in the US, and if you go to smashthefat.com/EFGT UK, that'll take you through to your respective Amazon page and help fund the show a little bit. And it'll be a nice farewell for me, just to get a little bit of a kickback from Amazon. But Dr. Hyman, Eat Fat, Get Thin sounds crazy. For anybody that hasn't heard about or read anything about this kind of research, you sound like an absolute nutcase. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I am pretty nutty. I'm a crazy man, actually. Yes, it's like, Columbus was like, "Hey, the world's not flat, but it looks flat, right? Fat seems to have more calories and carbs and protein, so it should make you fat, and it looks like the same stuff that's on your body. Fat's the same word." So, like, of course, right? But just like the earth is not flat, fat does not make you fat. And this has been a sad story that we've been in for the last, I don't know how many decades, since the government came out with this message of eat low fat in 1980 in the United States and the UK as well. And we listened. And guess what happened? We became the fattest nations on earth, like we're just exploding. We see diabetes rates skyrocketing. I think UK is a little behind the US, but it's still pretty bad. And I think that catching up, I want to be number 2. So I think it's really been a shock to learn that actually what's really driving the biology of fat, of your fat cells, is sugar and flour, which actually is worse than sugar in your body. And it does so by a hormonal problem that it creates called insulin resistance, or too much insulin. Now, insulin is the fertilizer for your fat cells. It's the storage hormone. It also does a number of things. It actually stimulates hunger. It slows your metabolism, and it stores fat in the fat cells. It sort of packs them away. It opens the gate, and all the energy that's in your blood from glucose or free fatty acids or even ketones gets stored. When insulin is low, which is what happens when you eat fat without the sugar and the refined carbs, because you can't combine them together. That's bad. That's called sweet fat. That's French fries, no fish and chips, and donuts, ice cream. That's not good. But when you eat just good quality fat with low glycemic diet, it actually doesn't produce insulin. And then you don't have these same phenomena. In fact, the opposite happens. You stimulate liberation of fat from your fat cells. You increase your metabolism. You shut down the hunger. It turns off the hunger switch. And it also, it's amazing. In one study by a colleague of mine, David Ludwig at Harvard, he took about 20 guys and then he fed them different diets and flipped them over every 4 weeks and then saw what happened to their metabolism. And when he fed them 60% fat diets, 10% carbs, compared to 60% carbs, 20% fat, he found that the fat group, and these were eating exactly the same calories. It wasn't like they were eating different amounts of calories. The ones that had the high fat, their metabolism was 300 calories a day faster.
Wow.
So literally it was like having them run an hour a day on the treadmill without getting up off the couch. That's how much extra energy they burned. And it also builds muscle. So it's completely opposite of what we thought. And it's not just a math problem. The whole idea is that calories in, calories out. It's all a math problem. You just eat less, exercise more. It's going to work out. It doesn't work out for most people. So you can't just have less soda. You have to have really the right quality of your food, and the composition of your diet is what drives the real problem.
Very much so. And that's really evident here in the UK. So the latest National Diet and Nutrition Survey, published in 2014, so just about 18 months ago, I think it was, showed that we're pretty much following the advice. We're actually, on average, 380 calories below what we're meant to be eating.
Yeah.
Also, we're at 48% carbohydrates. We're eating 4 out of 5 veg. We're eating 70 grams of red meat. And kind of all of these things, we're kind of, we're following the advice, yet we in the UK are 25% obese, the highest prevalence in Europe. It's absolutely
congratulations.
Shocking. Yeah, I know. We won that award. Oh, yeah. So that's fantastic. So it's all well and good that you're saying that we should just shift over to real foods that have got natural amounts of fat in them. That contains saturated fat, Doc. And doesn't that mean that my heart is going to explode?
Yes. Well, that's what we were all taught, right? There was a famous study by Dr. Ansel Keys back in the 50s called the 7-Country Study, where he mapped out all these countries in Europe and the world that had higher fat diets that seemed to map to having more heart attacks, particularly saturated fat. But the truth is that he left out like 14 or 16 studies that were actually showing the opposite, like France, which had a very high fat diet, but very little heart disease, or Spain. And so he kind of ignored data that didn't support his case. And then secondly, it was correlation, not causation. And when they looked at other data that was sort of confusing, actually it was the sugar in those countries that was more predictive of heart disease than the fat. And now we know from larger reviews, there was one published last year, a couple of years ago, in the Annals of Internal Medicine, 19 countries, 600,000 people, 72 studies reviewed, randomized controlled trials, observational data, plasma fatty acid, looking at blood levels of fatty acids. And they came to the conclusion that total and even saturated fat had no link to heart disease, which was kind of shocking. There's other reviews by Dr. Ronald Krauss and others looking at this, 350,000 people, 23 years, no link. And then when you look at interventional studies, and you take away the sugar and refined carbs, if you give animals a saturated fat diet in the context of a high carb diet, which is typically what they do in these studies, it's bad because it causes inflammation, because you have a high insulin. Yes, it's going to cause havoc. But if you have it in the context, which by the way is not easy to do, and most people won't do it, but I'm just talking about the science here of how this works. It's actually what I do. It's what works. But if you look at saturated fat in interventional studies, even doubling the saturated fat in your diet does not increase saturated fat in your blood. And people get confused about that because the data show that saturated fat in your blood causes heart disease. I agree. But what they don't tell you is that when you eat saturated fat, it's not what causes it to go up. What causes it to go up is sugar and fructose and refined carbs and bread and potatoes and rice. All that drives up the production of fat in your liver called lipogenesis. So opposite of what we thought. And then, there was a study that was published last week. It was a meta-analysis, a review of all these studies on saturated fat and stroke. And there was an inverse relationship, meaning the more saturated fat you had, the less stroke you had. So how does that all work? Plus, here's the thing. With cholesterol, we got oversimplified with cholesterol. And this is really just the evolution of science. We thought, cholesterol is bad. LDL seems to be bad. And so we got everyone wants to lower LDL with statins. But the problem is that statins lower LDL, but they don't affect triglycerides and HDL. And if you look at the data, HDL is, I think, a 4 times better predictor of heart attacks than LDL. Total cholesterol to HDL ratio is a far better predictor than LDL, which relates to the insulin. And the triglyceride HDL ratio is even a better predictor. And triglycerides and HDL are totally driven by sugar and carbs. The more sugar and carbs, higher triglycerides, lower HDL. And that's far more predictive. In fact, it's the actual particle number and the size of your LDL cholesterol that really matters. And no doctors measure that almost. We do it. We're starting to do it at Cleveland Clinic. I've been doing it for a decade. I don't know if it's available in the UK. It's called NMR or Cardio IQ. You can get it from LabCorp Quest. It's available.
I think it's just coming over.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to the scientist who basically discovered this. I said, when did you discover this, Dr. Krauss? He's like 40 years ago. I'm like, oh my God. Right. So now it's finally available. But actually what we found is that if you have a very low LDL, but you have a lot of small particles, that your risk is the greatest of having a heart attack. So you could have a very low LDL.
Wow.
And the particles are driven by sugar and refined carbs. Now, what's fascinating, if you look at these large studies, there's like a study, I think, of 59% of all admissions to hospitals in America for a period of like 5 or 6 years, about 230,000 patients. And they measured their cholesterol when they got in the hospital. 75% had normal LDL. 50% had optimal levels of LDL, under 100, and 17% had like levels under 70, which is like super great. But 60% had low HDL and high triglycerides. So, and I think it was like 10% had HDL over 60, which is the number you really want. Now, guess what increases your HDL? And guess what increases the large particles of LDL? Saturated fat.
Bingo.
Saturated fat. Like what? So actually, yes, your cholesterol will go up on saturated fat, but it's going to be the good kind. Your triglycerides will go down. Your HDL will go up. Your particles will get bigger. All that is actually more protective. Now, we still need more studies, more data, but the truth is that I think our whole conceptualization is wrong. And so the push for this LDL has been really driven through pharma, because statin drugs, which are probably prevalent in the UK and in America, to lower cholesterol, these are cholesterol-lowering drugs, commercials you see all the time on TV, they are a huge business. And everybody's focused on That was my friend Mike. Just came in. You see him?
Yeah, how's it going, Mike?
So
it's best to acknowledge you rather than not at all. Because otherwise, the viewers will be like, "What on earth is going on?"
Okay. So
like a psycho.
Mike is come over here, Mike. So Mike is my buddy. He's from Newfoundland, and he's a doctor as well. And Mike is a guy who decided that his metabolism wasn't working, and he decided to go on what we call a ketogenic diet, which is very high fat and very high saturated fat. And he's very religious about it, and he eats a lot of saturated fat. So Mike, we were just talking about saturated fat, and I want you to talk about your numbers and what happened to you when you gained the weight and lost the weight after you. No, it's okay. You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
He's fine.
You keep going.
Yeah, so Mike, come on back here. Mike, this is Mike from Newfoundland, my buddy. We're on a ski trip in Montana, and he's a super smart doctor, researcher, and he's a great guy. And he had his personal story. So, Mike, why don't you tell him like what happened, and how did you discover this whole high fat, saturated fat thing, and what happened when you started doing it?
Yeah, so about a year ago, I don't know if you know about healthcare in Canada, but MDs in Canada are far from what a functional medicine specialist would be like in the US. They don't really get too intrigued and in depth with the blood work.
We were just talking about that before you came in about particle size and all that.
Yeah, they don't look at it at all. So when I went to the US, I decided to get some things checked for myself, and discovered some shocking numbers in terms of LDL, small dense particles at like extreme levels, and
so a lot of those dangerous small particles you're talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, that led me to the ketogenic diet. Basically, that's where my research led me. That was probably the best route to go in terms of metabolic health.
So you had like pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome, right?
Yeah, metabolic syndrome for sure. I had like 4 out of 5 of the requirements, and so I undertook a ketogenic diet where I religiously ate like 80% of my diet was fat, moderate protein, between 30 and 40 grams per meal,
which is like about the size of your palm, maybe a little less.
Yeah. And I kept my net carbs to a level of around 25 grams. So I didn't count fiber, but net grams of carbs about 25,
which is super low.
Yeah. And then over the course of about 6 to 8 months, I corrected my small dense LDL particle number I corrected all my metabolic numbers.
Your triglycerides were high, your HDL was low. What happened to that?
Triglycerides were high, HDLs were low, insulin level was really high. That's why I couldn't drop any weight. Small dense LDL particles were a crazy number, like 2,300.
Oh my goodness, that's anything over 1,000 is bad.
And in about 7 months, I corrected things by about 50%.
Wow, that's awesome.
So,
and you lost 20 pounds.
Lost about 20 pounds.
Eating 80% fat.
Wicked.
Just felt big changes. Felt my breathing go to ease. Felt just a lot of good changes.
He's a much smarter, nicer guy now. You should have seen him last year.
So since then, I've discovered like a really high sensitivity to starch. So I've since cut out starch out of my diet, and I haven't gone to explore blood work numbers yet.
But you lost more weight or not?
I've dropped a little bit more, but that's only a recent development. So I'm still just giving my body time to heal and change.
And you measure your ketones every day by finger stick and your blood sugar?
Blood sugar and ketones anywhere from 2 to 6 times a day.
And you see actually you're in this state of ketosis. Now, ketones are the things that actually stimulate your brain to function better, your mitochondria work better on ketones. It helps to stimulate your metabolism. It cuts your hunger dramatically, so you don't eat as much. We had lunch yesterday, and like we're all having this lunch, and he's like, "I'm not hungry." And he's like, So it's really powerful. And it's not that everybody should be doing this, but if you have a severe metabolic problem, if you have diabetes, now we're at Cleveland Clinic, we're studying super high fat diets for reversing type 2 diabetes. which is happening around the world. There's studies going on at Harvard, for example. Osama Hamdi's at the Diabetes Center at Harvard, and he's like, look, we got it wrong. We're giving all these people high carb diets with diabetes, and in fact, we need to actually give them very high. We're giving them high carb diets, we're giving them higher fat diets. He's looking at the 70% fat diets and seeing dramatic changes. So we see that too. It's very powerful.
It is. It's absolutely incredible how kind of wrong we got it, and that we jumped in with both feet, and actually kind of the opposite is wrong. So for you, Mike, in your practice now, are you going to kind of be talking about this with your colleagues and things, and try and spread the word throughout the Canadian medical community?
It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
I work with some naturopaths, and my wife's a health coach, and so I try to push people more so to because I'm more of a manual medicine guy. I don't really have the time, nor the patience really, to sort of go to the dietary route, and I find that it's better to find the other people. Like
he's an osteopath. He's like always has hands on people.
So I utilize those professions in order to sort of more help people make the transition.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, I just remember as you were talking, I was reminded of a lecture I gave a couple of days ago in Cleveland, where this woman got up and she's like, Dr. Hyman, and there's a guy named Caldwell Esselstyn, and he's an older doctor, a very smart guy, who was from Cleveland Clinic, who decided we should reverse heart disease having zero fat. So no avocados, no olive oil, no nuts and seeds, like not even any little bit of even vegetarian fat. This woman got up and said, I had a heart attack. I went and followed this program. I'm eating zero fat. I'm diabetic. My sugars are out of control. I had a second heart attack. Can't get my sugars under control. I'm just taking more and more insulin. Like, what do I do? So here's the problem. She was eating a very low, very, very low fat diet, more starch. And even if it was good stuff like grains and beans, if someone's diabetic, if someone's metabolism is already screwed up, it's very hard even with some of those foods to regulate it. So if you're basically healthy, yeah, you can have some grains and beans, you'll be fine. But if you're diabetic or you're massive overweight, starch is going to be a problem. Like Mike said, his body was so messed up that even a little bit of starch for him is a problem. So there's a spectrum of people, from those people who have more wide ranges of flexibility in their diet genetically, to those people who have to be more narrow and actually have more carbohydrate intolerance, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
Even with that bit of rice I had the other night, my blood sugar was 6.2 next morning.
Yeah, so we made special kind of rice, which is resistant starch rice, where you heat the rice, you cook it with coconut oil, and then you cool it. And then you eat the cooled rice. It's supposed to be a resistant starch, meaning that it doesn't get it broken down in the same way as regular rice. Mm-hmm. But saying even that for him was not that great.
Yeah, it still spiked your blood sugar the next morning. 6.2. Wow.
Great research that was done on people's gene duplications of AMY1, and how different populations have different responses to starch, and how what matters is the gene duplications. So if you can get the genetic testing done, see how many duplications you have of the AMY1 gene.
Yeah,
it could give you a really sort of without experimenting, it would give you a really good indication of what your tolerance level to starch would be in your diet.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, absolutely. So how do we kind of replicate this across the nations, that have completely messed up their healthcare?
I wrote the book, Eat Fat, Get Thin, to help people.
Of course.
Of course, yeah. Well, what I did was take people through the story, right? I take people through the story. What is the perfect storm? How do we get in this big fat mess, right? We had the perfect storm of things. One, we had some bad science that professional associations jumped on, the government jumped on, and then the food industry jumped on. And it was those four things that really drove us in the wrong path. So that's what happened. And we were told to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, rice, cereal, and pasta a day. I mean, 11 servings of bread a day as a foundation for our diet. That was our foundation, which was the government's advice to us. So now it's flipping. And the government of the United States, I'm not sure what the UK's done, but they've actually come out now with a revision of the dietary guidelines for the first time in 35 years that they released the guidelines. They said, you know what, we got it wrong. We're removing any limits on total dietary fat. No more limits on dietary fat. And we're getting rid of the recommendations to remove cholesterol from our diets. No more egg white omelets. So this is not just my advice. This is actually from the government's advisory group, which is a group of esteemed scientists that come together to try to sort through the data. Now, I think they got some things wrong, but I think that it's still much closer to the answer than what we should be doing. So I think it's happening. There's more and more people talking about it. And I think the science is shifting. It's very hard. I mean, listen, if I'm saying here, basically calories in, calories out is not right, like then people are like, well, who is he to say? Who is he to say that physics are wrong? That the first law of thermodynamics is wrong? Well, I'm not saying it's wrong. What I'm saying is that people don't understand the first law of thermodynamics. The first law says energy is conserved in a system, a closed system. The body's not a closed system. If you drop feathers and lead in a vacuum, they drop at the same rate. If you drop them off the London Bridge, they drop at a different rate. Why? Because of air. And when you eat something, your metabolism is there. So a calorie eaten in your body is different than a calorie burned in the laboratory. And that's the difference. And it changes your hormones, it changes your gut flora, it changes your brain chemistry, it changes your appetite, it changes inflammation, all these factors that drive metabolism. So food is not just calories, it's information. This is the fundamental thinking of functional medicine, which is the food is not just energy, it's actually instructions that actually gives your body the information it needs to regulate or downregulate different pathways of function. And you can upgrade or downgrade your biological software. And most people, with what they eat, they downgrade their biological software. And then what we do with functional medicine is we upgrade it. And that's what we're doing.
Fantastic. And so what should people be eating to upgrade their body software?
What should they be eating? Oh, that's easy. So I kind of joke. I was on a panel with a couple of friends of mine. One was a paleo doc and one was a vegan. And I was like, okay, well, I'm somewhere in the middle here. I must be a pegan. And I was sort of about it. And then actually the Telegraph in the UK picked it up and the CNN picked it up, and it was just kind of funny. And I wrote an article about it. Essentially, it's like, what does everybody have in common, right? The basic principles of healthy. You should be eating lots of fruits and vegetables, more vegetables than fruit. You should be eating very low sugar diet, low glycemic diet, meaning low levels of refined sugars and flour. Everybody agrees on that. We should be, most people agree that we should be eating whole foods, not processed food. Well, pretty much everybody agrees on that. And no additives. We eat 2,500 pounds of food additives every year in terms of MSG, aspartame. We should probably eat foods that are organic or sustainable when possible and not too expensive for us. So that's a lower priority, but it would help the environment and help us. And we should be eating foods that contain lots of good fats, avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds. I think saturated fat is a debatable thing, and oils are debatable, but I think we covered saturated fat. I don't think it's the enemy that we thought. In fact, Mike's cholesterol got better on saturated fat. He was eating butter, coconut fat, which is set 90% saturated fat, whereas butter is 60% saturated fat. And even olive oil is 20% saturated fat. If olive oil is so bad for you, then we would have known it, not showing that it reduces your risk of heart attack. So then it's really lots of nuts and seeds. It's just good, whole, fresh food and limited amounts of starch. So some beans and grains if you want, and if you're not carbohydrate intolerant, but not like huge piles of rice and beans, because those can turn into sugar. So that's basically it. And if you want to have something like a treat, that's fine. It's just a recreational drug. Sugar is a recreational drug, and you can have it sometimes, but it's not like you have it breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Nice, man. That's awesome. I like that sugar is a recreational drug. It's not about completely restricting it. It's
of course.
Like 100%. It's just sort of saying, look, just know that there are risks involved.
Sure.
With this, and it's not a good idea to do it every day. Otherwise, you turn into a junkie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you end up in loads of health problems. Well, that's absolutely fantastic, and amazingly, you're going to be coming to the UK.
Yeah.
As well, which is amazing. In 2 weeks' time, doing a talk in London on the 2nd of April and the 3rd of April. I believe the one on the Saturday, the 2nd of April, which is my birthday.
Happy
birthday. Which is about kickstarting your health. And then the 3rd of April, Sunday the 3rd of April, is an introduction into functional medicine.
Right. I'm going to cover that thing too. I got a whole hour-and-a-half talk on the slippery science of fat, separating fat from fiction. So
brilliant. So if people want to find out more about that, if you go to refindhealth.com, that's re-findhealth.com, then you'll be able to buy your ticket there for Saturday 2nd of April and Saturday 3rd of April. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to make the Saturday, as it is my birthday, and as we said before, I'm moving house and loads of other stuff, but I'll be there on the Sunday. So guys that are listening, if you want to meet me as well as Dr. Hyman, come on Sunday 3rd of April. And then finally, in the meantime, make sure that you buy his book so that he can autograph it by going to smashthefat.com/EFGTUS if you're in the US, and if you're in the UK, smashthefat.com/EFGTUK. That'll take you straight through to the Amazon page, help support the show, and also find out all the great information by the great Dr. Mark Hyman. So was there anywhere else where people can find you at all, Doc?
Yeah, sure. They can go to drhyman.com. I make a weekly house call to everybody through a video and a blog, different topics. A lot of them are on fat now. And I also have a great Eat Fat Get Thin website where there's also resources, community stuff, and even challenge course where people can do it together, because people do much better together.
Fantastic. And they can also go to eatfatgetthin.com.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and go through all of that program. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a true honor. But we always do something at the end with all of our guests, which is to hear a smash it out, because that's that's our hashtag, to smash it out. So on the count of 3, I want both of you, Dr. Hyman and Mike as well, to shout as loud as you can, smash it out, particularly seeing that it's the last one.
Okay.
Well. So you've got to make it count. All right. So on the count of 3,
all right,
shout, smash it out. 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out!
Awesome. There we go. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a real pleasure. Everybody check out Dr. Mark Hyman's book, Eat Fat Get Thin, on Amazon, and also make sure that you like him on Facebook at Dr. Mark Hyman, or on Twitter, Mark Hyman MD. Thank you so much again for your time, Doc. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to meeting you in a couple of weeks' time, face to face, properly.
Face, yeah. All right.
Fantastic. All right. And then to all the viewers and listeners out there, thank you so much for the past 3 years, in fact. And it's with a heavy heart that I have to say goodbye. But if you want to check out what I'm moving on to next, check out the public health collaboration, which is phcuk.org. All right, guys. So be well. And of course, smash it out.
Thank you.
Take care.